this desire to fight side by side in American missions overseas and to turn our back on generations of UN peacekeeping when we know that those missions today are succeeding, when we know that they're doing so at less cost, when we know that Canada has an important role to play, well, it's illogical.
I support peacekeeping. I still see the idealistic impulse that it springs from and fosters. But I like to think that I'm a realist, and I believe that peacekeeping should only be used in the right circumstances. Peacekeeping should not drive the Canadian Forces. It should be one of the Canadian Forces' many roles. And what should determine when we do peacekeeping? What should determine when we fight a war? National interests. National interests are not difficult to detail for most nations, and Canada's, in fact, are very clear. The first of our national interests is that we must protect our territory, the security of our people, our unity. Second, we must strive to protect and enhance our independence. Third, we must promote the economic growth of the nation to support the prosperity and welfare of the people. And we must work with like-minded states in and outside international forums for the protection and enhancement of democracy and freedom. So what does this mean? What do our national interests lead to? That we must be able to fight a war if necessary, always in cooperation with our friends. That's how we fought World War I and World War II. That's how, in a lesser way, we fought in Korea, in former Yugoslavia and Kosovo, in Afghanistan and Libya. Those were national interest wars that required a relatively small but well-equipped, well-trained Canadian forces.
It would have been easier to defend Professor Granatstein's position tonight in 2005. Before our effort in Kandahar. But no one can credibly argue that our effort in Kandahar has succeeded. We have lost 158 Canadians, and the security situation is not better, but worse. The security situation in Afghanistan is so bad today that Kabul, the capital city, is now described by a senior Canadian general in testimony before Parliament as an extremely hostile environment. And we do a disservice to our country, we do a disservice to our soldiers, we do a disservice to the world by closing them off with a wall of misunderstanding. That's all I'm arguing. We cannot turn back the clock. We can only remember those who have sacrificed. But with respect to the future, we owe it to ourselves to recognize that peacekeeping is alive and well, and there may well be a role for Canadian soldiers there, and we should prepare for that eventuality.
A few years ago for Canada to act on Prime Minister Paul Martin's cockamamie idea that Canada should have a peacekeeping brigade, 5,000 or so troops within the Canadian forces. No details were ever provided by the Prime Minister or by Mr. Byers, but presumably we'd have lightly armed troops wearing blue berets, driving surplus Iltis jeeps, each with a sociologist and a specialist in conflict resolution in the back seat. I jest, of course. We don't have enough sociologists to do that role. But there is a serious point here. A platoon, a company, a battalion, or a brigade trained only for peacekeeping can only do peacekeeping. A platoon, a company, a battalion, a brigade trained for warfighting can do every military operation, from the most benign blue beret peacekeeping to fighting a war. Yes.
But I support the purchase of new C-17s and new Hercules. I support the purchase of new maritime helicopters. I support Canadian forces that can do a variety of tasks, including humanitarian missions, including peacekeeping, including peacemaking, including peace support, and when necessary, war fighting. But I do not want us to lose sight of the broader need and the broader opportunities, because we're denigrating peacekeeping and tens of thousands of veterans who did peacekeeping as sociologists, or somehow as wimps. They're not wimps. They're very brave people who saved very many lives. Thank you.
The purpose of a military, after all, is to defend a nation's national interests, and this country has national interests. It is a conceit to assume, as too many Canadians do, that peacekeeping is a defining aspect of the Canadian identity, something that reflects our fundamental values and beliefs.
One minute.
It does not do that. It never has done that. The Canadian forces should reflect our real fundamental values and interests, and those are that democracy and freedom matter to us, and that we will continue, as we have in the past, to defend those values and those interests with all our strengths. On Remembrance Day, that's the proper lesson, it seems to me, for us to draw.